Hello and welcome to the Empowered Expat Wife podcast. If you moved abroad following your significant other and are looking to create a fulfilled life on your terms there, this is the place to be. I'm your host Camilla Quintana and I'm so excited to be on this journey with you and to inspire you to create the kind of life abroad you truly deserve. Hi ladies, I hope you're all having a lovely day. Today I have a special topic for you that is a little different, but it's been one of my favorite topics for the past year or so, and I've learned such valuable lessons. I could help my clients in a different manner with these insights also. And so for the longest time, I wanted to record an episode on this, which I'm doing right now. So, I'm going to talk to you about finding more flow in life in general, but also in your work or business, in your relationships, and your mental well being by tapping into your feminine energy. And as always, I'll share some practical, actionable steps that you can take to achieve the same. But now, first of all, let me just quickly give you a little backstory of how I came to deeply engage in that topic. It was just over a year ago. COVID hit, we all remember. Schools closed, and I found myself with two preschoolers at home, unable to go outside at all, newly pregnant, my husband working from home as well, and me trying to keep up my business and still show up 100% for my coaching clients who, just like you, I'm sure, were going through the same thing. We all were. I remember one of my dear clients had to retreat to her closet for our sessions just to get away from the kids. And of course, they'd still find her, so it was just crazy times. So for a lot of moms, this was our reality. It was really intense. And when I look at the answers I receive in the Expat Mom Support Club, which is our Facebook group that was born at that time to lend support in this very specific situation, there's a question that you answer when you join. And by the way, if you're not a part of it, make sure you do, where the women share what they're struggling with the most. And it's still that. It's this hangover, let me call it, from being there for their family's needs excessively. The challenge of working at the same time, the difficulties that can arise in their relationship due to spending so much time together or due to simply not having a life of their own right now, because that's what it feels like to so many of us, right? So the root problem I see is that women in general are under a lot of pressure these days. We need to overachieve. We hold ourselves to very high standards. Society does too. And that can leave us feeling burnt out, depleted, lonely, and resentful. And the reason for that is that we're operating on too much masculine energy. Our society and our culture is very much built on masculine energy. It's overly dominant, it's glorified, while the feminine energy is, apart from vastly underrepresented, it's seen as weak sometimes and as undesirable. Now, this is very important. Masculine and feminine energy is not a synonym for men and women. I repeat, it's not about men and women. It's not about gender. We all have both energies inside of us, men and women, right? And it's kind of like a yin and yang situation. So what's the difference between the two? The masculine energy is often associated with the sun energy, right? It's direct, it's driven, it's focused, it's strong, it's goal-oriented, it's assertive, competitive, logical. It takes action. It's about giving and doing. The feminine energy, on the other hand, is about receiving and about being. It's nurturing, intuitive, emotional, with a more diffused awareness. It's creative, flowing, flexible. And something I want to make sure that you know about the feminine energy is that it is powerful. It's a different kind of powerful than the masculine energy. But unfortunately, we're so used to associating power with the masculine traits and the masculine elements that I mentioned before. So sometimes the feminine qualities in all of us can be labeled as weak, but they're definitely not. So now both men and women will find themselves at different points of this spectrum of masculinity and femininity, right? But most men will identify with a masculine essence and most women with a feminine one. Now, for those of you, so if someone is listening and thinks, well, I don't identify with the feminine qualities that you mentioned at all, Camilla, that might be the case. Or I'd say that we need to also look at how conditioning and trauma have affected your attunement to your feminine side. I remember this one client of mine who felt like she needed to be the son for her father, which she knew he would have preferred. And that led her to completely negate the feminine energies inside of her and also dismiss them in others, which then caused a lot of problems in her relationship and in the way that she led her life. Because she was out of balance because of that, right? It was a coping mechanism for her to adopt the masculine so excessively. And also, a lot of times when we look at very successful and accomplished women, since they've had such a hard time to get to where they are, to make themselves heard and to get respected, they too had to adopt a more masculine way of being and doing. And you know, when I think about the quota that sometimes they need to fill with women, I think this should go beyond gender. It should be about adding the unique perspectives of the feminine energy that are so needed in all areas of life, and especially in business and politics where they're almost completely missing. And you know, I mentioned trauma, which I know is a big word, it's a harsh word, but when you think about women's history and the hardships that we've endured as a collective over time, living in a patriarchal system, which by the way I believe is also very unhealthy and very damaging for our men, but you know, that's not the focus of this episode right now. So just think about, right? All of your female ancestors' disappointments, their fears, the feeling of helplessness that many of them lived with day in, day out, that is passed on to us not only through culture and history, but also through epigenetics. So trauma is really passed on throughout generations and manifests in our genetic code. Now, ideally, we have some kind of balance of both energies, right? In ourselves and also in the world as a whole. But this is not the case right now. Our world and our system, our politics, the workplace is dominated by male energy on steroids. And that's just not just the way it is. You know, people say, oh, that's just the way business works, or that's just the way politics work. No, it's not. It's actually an imbalance. And it's really harmful for all of us. It's harmful for our planet that we're in a process of exploiting and depleting. It's harmful for our men, like I alluded to in the beginning, because they have been taught to reject and dismiss their feminine energy inside of them. And so they're often completely overwhelmed with their emotions or completely out of touch with them. And it's particularly harmful for us women. So going back to that little story I told you in the beginning about lockdown and the overwhelm it led to, but at the same time, I was getting stressed by seeing how others who likely did not have children, they thrived and they flourished and they finally had the time to do so many things that I really wanted to do, right? They went through their extensive reading lists. They did, workout routines and meditation practices and took courses and all these things that I found myself not having the time for, not having the tranquility and the peace of mind for. So that was my breaking point where I realized that I could not compete in the doing range. Granted, I did a lot, but I just could not do anymore. And so I felt like I was falling behind. But then I realized that where I could keep up was in the being range. And that's what I've been doing. And it's really shaped the way I run my business, my household, my family. Okay, so I don't run my family, but you know what I mean, right? So enter the feminine way of doing things. I think we can create a life that is so far more pleasurable and enjoyable and aligned to our feminine essence, and where we can actually excel in ways that we could not before. Because before, excelling meant hard work, willpower, but also always looking over your shoulder to see who might be coming after you. The competitors, the critics, the haters. If you want to be the best at things and if you want to do them alone in order to kind of reinstate that you are the best so no one can even help you, then you leave no room for others to join you there. You will essentially feel alone. You leave no room for your emotions, your vulnerability, for receiving help, and that is against our feminine essence. And that journey towards reconnecting with our feminine essence more and more is essentially a process of unlearning old and ineffective and potentially destructive patterns in order for us to sink into a completely new way of being that will feel more aligned, more in flow, and not invite so much burnout and depletion, which is a feeling so many women have felt in their role as a wife, a mother, a housewife, an employee, a business owner, you name it, right? And whenever you start feeling signs of burnout, which can be resentment, it could be excessive exhaustion or losing joy in things or in people that you actually love, those are all good indicators that you are operating too much from the masculine energy. And you need to balance that out with some feminine energy. All right? So let's move on to some practical things that you can do to allow your feminine energy to flow through you and your household and your family and your business. Number one is to reconnect with your inner wisdom. We need to listen to the clues that our body and our heart send us much more. We need to get into the habit of checking in with ourselves and connecting with our inner wisdom and our intuition. Many of us are so out of alignment with ourselves that we don't even know anymore how we feel about certain things. And then we want to compensate by thinking about them and thinking some more and rationalizing. But we all know that a decision or an action that is taken from overthinking and overanalyzing will not necessarily feel right. It will not necessarily make you happy. And if we were more in touch with our intuition and our inner guidance system, we could allow our feelings to actually fulfill their purpose, which is to guide us, to make us notice things that our rational mind cannot grasp. See, we need both. We cannot operate purely from the rational mind, and we cannot operate purely from the heart. We need that balance of the masculine and feminine energy inside of us. And I found that being in touch with my inner wisdom makes my life a lot easier. And it helps me take better decisions, be more content, less resentful, and less uncertain. So if this is new to you, start by simply checking in with yourself from time to time, each day, and asking how you feel about something. Not what you think about it, but how you feel about it. That newspaper article, that comment your friend made, that request by a loved one. You don't need to do anything else, just become aware and accustomed to doing this, to asking yourself, how do I feel about this? What does my intuition say about this? Then step number 2 is realigning your energy. So this may sound a little bit woo-woo, but it is my ultimate guidance principle. And I think I mentioned this here before. I mentioned it in the podcast about mindsets, the healthy mindsets that I adopted. That in my business, I rarely create or send out an offer or an email or record something if my energy isn't right. Because I believe that our energy is transmitted to our work and through our work and our words, even if it's in writing, to others. Okay? So if I need to work on something, but I feel like my energy isn't aligned for it right now, instead of forcing myself to push through, which is the masculine energy way of doing it, I wait a little bit. Because, and I've noticed that so many times, the process will be more effortless. It will be easier once I am realigned. And so the result will be totally different and it will be better. And it will reach others in a better way. So luckily, in my case, it doesn't happen all too often that my energy is misaligned, or else I would have a hard time to run my business, And also I've learned ways to quickly align myself again with my highest energy. For instance, by adopting those 3 healthy mindsets that I taught you in episode 29. Also by taking a quick break, going outside, practicing gratitude, or pampering myself in some way, even if it's just about taking a break, making myself a cup of coffee, and taking care of myself, right? Like I said, the feminine energy is a lot about nurturing. So if you can nurture yourself, that is the ultimate act of love, and your nervous system will respond to that. Your energy will balance itself out. And in case you're thinking, oh my goodness, Camilla, if I always checked in to see if I like to do something, then I would never do anything and I would not get anything done. Hold up there for a second. I don't believe that. It's not been my experience. My experience is that it's really just about allowing ourselves to take that quick break, right? That 10-minute break to nurture ourselves, to realign, and then to get back and be more effective. I don't think it will require you to take a holiday before you can cook your family's next meal, right? That would be crazy. And again, it's not about only tapping into our feminine. It's about, balancing the two. But give this a try. I invite you to give this a try. So, of course, there will be times in our life and in our work where we'll have to push through, even though we're exhausted or we're in a bad mood or we're simply not feeling like it. But whenever it is possible to integrate this feminine energy into your general way of doing things, it will go a long way. It's a way of slowing down, realigning in order to speeding up and creating something even better and even greater. And another way I like to do this is that when I have a to-do list, for instance, for the morning, for my working hours, I don't assign time slots. That's way too rigid for me. I want to be able to have the flexibility Granted that it's not a session with my clients, of course, but I want to have the flexibility to say, okay, now I feel like writing this blog post. Now I feel like working on the podcast. Now I feel like this and like that. And by honoring, and it goes back to our intuition, by really tapping into our intuition and honoring what comes up for us, I believe we are actually more productive, even if at first sight it might not seem like it. Okay, point number 3 is adding strategic recharge periods. Now, I was thinking of calling this rest periods, but I'll admit that I'm the first to be like, what? Rest? Like a nap in the middle of the day? No, thank you. That sounds like a huge waste of my precious time. So let's redefine rest. Let's call it recharge time, right? It's not laziness. It's a strategic move added to your calendar, maybe in between meetings or in between appointments. Maybe when you get your period. Now, this is no joke, right? A lot of the literature that I've read on bringing back the feminine energy inside of us and in the world, it talks about living much more according to our menstrual cycle. And if you're not menstruating, then according to the moon cycle. So in honoring that men are more linear beings and women are more cyclical beings, what they suggest is that you consider the 4 different phases of your menstrual cycle or the moon cycle, wherein you're strongest, the time where you really want to get out there and you want to communicate and you want to create new things is either the ovulation time or the full moon. And when you are menstruating or it's the time of the new moon, you really want to rest. Now, I know how crazy that sounds, right? And it brings up all those nasty macho jokes about women being in a bad mood because we're on our period, or that we are not able to do the same work because of our period or something like that, that it also triggers our own feeling of probably thinking, oh, this again, I have to go through this again. So annoying. So generally speaking, we're really rejecting this part of our femininity. It's like it's not even happening. That's what we project to the outside. Don't even dare to think that this could this could influence us in any way or reduce our ability to be productive and so forth, right? So I think in this situation, our mind really disagrees, but our body would actually really need to rest on those days. So this is something that I'm trying now to honor and embrace more. And instead of thinking, oh, this is annoying, but I'm gonna act like nothing's happening, I'm trying to see this as an opportunity actually to connect with myself and with my body and to even do something nice, like maybe watch some TV, which I otherwise wouldn't do during the day. All right, but now back to adding strategic recharge periods, right? That's where we actually were, because before I went off on a tangent. How can you break up your day, and especially your hectic days, with something that will allow you to recharge? It doesn't have to be a nap or a bath. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It could maybe be something like listening to music or to a podcast or doing some gardening or just taking that coffee break that I mentioned before, right? And I want to add something here. If you're a homemaker or a stay-at-home mom, you've probably been led to believe that what you're doing is somehow not enough or not as valuable. Though you know how much work it is, but you probably find yourself sort of needing to defend or justify sometimes what it is that you do all day. You gotta love that question. What is it you do all day? Never ask a mom or a housewife that, because there's always something to do, right? And so when you feel that way, You may feel like you're not allowed to rest and to recharge because of that. And you might think, well, it's not like I'm working, I'm just at home with my kids and I love them so much. So how could I ask for more time out for myself? Well, let me tell you, there is such a thing as mom and housewife burnout. It's a real thing. And I've worked with clients who were going through this in my coaching practice. And I personally know firsthand how threatening it can feel to think about doing less and putting yourself first, as if that meant that you cared less about your loved ones or you didn't appreciate them. And this often happens at a subconscious level, which is why it's so hard to really go there and work with that. But the reality is that you too need a break. You especially need a break because your work is 24 hours, 7 days a week. There are no holidays. And how can you do that? Well, you start with baby steps. No quantum leaps necessary if that feels like too much of a stretch. Start with small but consistent recharge periods. Ask yourself how you feel about things. Ask yourself what you could do to recharge and to do yourself some good. All right, number 4 is allow more and control less. Allowing is feminine, receptive energy, and controlling is masculine, active energy. So I find this principle really helpful for our relationships. Women, we wear so many hats these days. We do a big part of the parenting, the housekeeping. We work, we manage life abroad. We make the plans. So this again leads us to operate very much from the masculine. Remember, the doing. But you know what? That is so exhausting. And it probably doesn't feel gratifying to you at all because there is no feminine energy in that, right? And we need to invite it back into our lives. That's another thing, by the way, about the feminine energy. It needs to be invited in. It's more passive. That's why our masculine energy is so dominant in the world, and it often doesn't leave room for the feminine. Okay, so back to our relationships. Granted that you are in a heterosexual relationship like I am, okay, let me speak for myself and give you an example from my own life, all right? When I work so hard all day on all fronts and I manage our life here, I manage my work, I do a lot by myself because my husband is away at work, I go into this toughness. It's almost like I want to say, hey, look at everything I can do. I don't even need anyone's help. And that feels good to my ego, but my soul actually feels a sense of contraction. It doesn't feel good. It's almost like a defense mechanism, as in, I need to be tough all day. Okay, now look at how tough I can be. But by doing that, I'm actually the one bringing all the masculine energy into our relationship. Or I'm competing with my husband's masculinity in a way. And since we all need polarity, that healthy balance and that play between the masculine and the feminine, what I do by bringing so much masculine energy to the table is that I push him into a more passive state. And that's something interesting about the masculine energy because it really wants to be the leader, right? Like the leader of the pack or the tribe. There's always one male leader, right? So if he feels that that place is occupied, then he will likely go into a more passive state where he thinks, oh, okay, she's all set. She's got it under control, so I can just, relax now. But actually, I want him to be in his masculine. I want him to show up for me and take care of me, especially after an intensive day. So, an antidote for this that I found works well is to make more space for him to do that for me. Not compete with who brings more masculine energy to the table, who does more, who achieves more, because that does not feel good to me. And remember, the feminine energy is just as powerful as the masculine energy, only in a different way. That unfortunately we sometimes doubt if that's even powerful, but that's just a misconception and one that has seriously damaged, gender roles on both sides and the world in general. So I mentioned making more space for him to step into his masculine energy. And I'll be honest, that is a process for me, even though I consider myself a very feminine woman. But still, that sense of look at everything I do, and I do it by myself, and I can do it by myself, I admit that's something that I need to unlearn. And one way I'm doing that is by sharing more openly with him how I feel. I admit that I'm in need of help, not because I'm weak, but because I want it, right? That's actually strong, knowing what I want and going after it. Or I admit that something he said made me feel bad. Of course, using I statements and not attacking, rather informing and inviting a conversation, but also being open and vulnerable about this. I'm done playing superwoman for my husband, which I kind of felt the need to do until recently, to be honest. And I'm trying to communicate more from the heart now, get less defensive, and just allowing myself to be me. And for him to get to know this other side of me. And also allowing myself to drop this masculine energy that's making me resentful, and allowing him to step into his masculine energy more. So if you notice a pattern like this in your relationship, or it could even be a power struggle sometimes, right? So I think what that indicates is that you are fighting with the same weapons. And remember, the feminine isn't weak. It's a different kind of power. So if you are in some kind of power struggle with your husband or with your partner, have a deeper look and see if you're simply out of polarity, and whether it would make sense and would feel aligned to you to step more into your feminine. Maybe in that area where you're fighting, maybe he wants to be the one to step into his feminine side, right? It doesn't always have to be about gender, but that's something that you want to look into to create more polarity and more balance. Okay, and the last point I want to mention, which is again something where I've created big shifts by tapping more into my feminine energy, is to choose collaboration over competition. Traditionally, women work together. That's actually the feminine way of living. It's in community. But in the West, especially where individualism, for instance, is a high value, many women find themselves so alone in parenting, working, living, managing life. And it would often be so much easier to share that load with others. And I think especially as expats, we tend to know about the importance of creating our little network, our community. But it's not always easy to find. It depends a lot on where you're based. But what about asking for help? How do you feel about asking for help? If you're like me, you're quick to help others, but reluctant to ask for help yourself. But asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Actually, it's just going back to the way women have always done things together. And I believe that we need to stop competing with each other so much. And again, right, this I'm going to show you that I can do it by myself, be it in our private lives or in business. First of all, there's enough slices of the cake for everyone that we do not need to compete. If you want to be the best, like the mom that bakes the best birthday cakes or the best at your work, then again, you're going to end up alone up there on your throne. All collaborators, potential collaborators, will feel like competitors to you, and you will feel lonely. Whose shoulder are you going to cry on when you're so fixated on being the best or on doing it by yourself? I think we're much better off collaborating with each other instead of competing. All right, so now last but not least, if you're like, okay, that's interesting, Camilla, I'd like to balance my energies and invite my feminine energy to rise more inside of me, but where should I even start? Well, some great ways of doing that is through creativity, for instance, through movement, dance, play. The feminine energy is very playful also. A book I like to recommend, which was such a game changer for me, is Do Less by Kate Northrup. I love that book. There are some others, but I feel like this book is a really good way to start. All right, so now I'm really curious to know, first of all, when you hear me talking about reconnecting to your intuition and your inner wisdom, aligning your energy, including strategic recharge periods into your days, allowing more and controlling less, stepping back from that need to control, and also collaborating more and competing less. How does that feel in your body? Does that feel like a weight lifted off your shoulders? How do you feel about that? To me, it feels so expansive and it feels so good. Like it feels like my intuition is telling me, yes, lean into that more. And as I said, it's a process. It's first of all, it's a process of unlearning the way we've been taught to do things. And second of all, it's a process to allow ourselves to lean into that feminine energy. All right, so this was what I wanted to share with you. And I'm particularly curious about this topic because I know it's a bit more unconventional. So do let me know what you think of it, what you've made of all of this, and in what ways you can invite your feminine energy to rise within yourself. Take care, everyone, and I'll be back with you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to share this episode with your expat besties and show me some love in the reviews. Want more juicy content designed for expat wives? Then head over to my website, www.camillaquintana.com, or follow me on Instagram and Facebook at coach.camillaquintana.